Hey, welcome to Torah Project. In this video, I'd like to discuss what Yeshua was really saying when he said, "Before Abraham was, I am." Let's pick up in John chapter 8. I'd like to start in verse 21. The specific verse is in verse 58 when he says, "Before Abraham was, I am." But I want to start a little before that and put into question some other verses so that when we get to it, we have a little bit more understanding on what he's actually trying to say. So starting in John chapter 8, verse 21. "And he said again to them, I go away and you will seek me, and you will die in your sin. Where I am going, you cannot come." So the Jews were saying, "Surely he will not kill himself, will he, since he says, 'Where I am, you cannot come'?" And he was saying to them, "You are from below, and I am from above. You are of this world, and I am not of this world." Verse 24 is one of the verses that I'd like to put into question before we get to 58. "Therefore, I said to you that you will die in your sin, for unless you believe I am He, you will die in your sin." So there's one verse that has the same word. It would be in Hebrew. In my opinion, they're speaking Hebrew, not Aramaic. So it would be Yehiye, that I am He, and you will die in your sins. And so the word "he" is in italics, is added into the translation because for some reason they decided to put "he" in there, which is interesting. But let's move on. I'll discuss more on my opinion on that in a little bit. But check this out. In verse 25, he says, "So they were saying to him, 'Who are you?' And Yeshua said to them, 'What I've been saying to you from the beginning. I have many things to speak and to judge concerning you, but he who sent me is true, and the things which I heard from him, these I speak to the world.' They did not realize that he had been speaking to them about the Father. So Yeshua said to them, 'When you lift up the Son of Man, then you will know that I am He.'" There it is again. In italics. He is in italics. "And I do nothing on my own initiative, but I speak these things as the Father taught me." So, in these two instances, the translators put "he" in italics instead of just leaving "I am." And no one ever discusses that in the Christian movement or, in the Torah aspect, or, believers coming out of the Christian church and then coming into the Torah believing movement or the Hebrew roots movement, whatever you guys want to call it. No one ever really references those verses 24 and 28. See, he said it 3 times. No, they never say that. They never say, in reference to the burning bush in Exodus chapter 3, they never say, "See, this is what he's saying right here." And then again in 28, this is what he's saying right here. No, it's always just in verse 58 that it's referenced, because they didn't put the word "he" in italics in verse 58. They left it out. Let's move forward, and I'll prove it to you. For context's sake, let's start in verse 54 of John chapter 8. Verse 54 of John chapter 8. Yeshua answered, "If I glorify myself, my glory is nothing. It is my Father who glorifies me, of whom you say he is our God, and you have not come to know him, but I know him. And if I say that I don't know him, I will be a liar like you, but I do know him and keep his word. Your father Abraham rejoiced to see my day." That's a strange thing to say. "And he saw it and was glad." So the Jews said to him, "You are not 50 years old, and have you seen Abraham?" And Yeshua said to them, "Truly, truly, I say to you, before Abraham was, I am." But they didn't put the word "he" in italics. Why? That is classic Christian doctrinal interpretation. Christian doctrinal translation right there. They should have stayed true to the text. In verse 24, they added he, and then in verse 28, they added he. Why didn't they add it here? Because they brought their bag with them to the scriptures. You know, I had this conversation once with a man that I care about. And when I had first gotten saved, we had this wonderful Bible study. And man, the Lord was really with us. We loved each other greatly, and we served each other greatly. And we were repenting, man, weeping before the Lord in my friend's house. It was just a wonderful time of fellowship and just closeness. And I was telling him, I was like, hey, you know, this is before the Torah movement. It was like, hey, you know what we should do? We should get John MacArthur's study Bible and just follow along with it so that we don't really get deceived. And, you know, my intentions were right. I was just telling him, let's do that. Let's go through the New Testament and just say, you know, just whatever he says, MacArthur, let's just have that be our point of view, or let's adopt his kind of thought within the scriptures, because he's right on, you know. And my buddy's reply, man, I'll never forget it. It was, no, you know what, Tone? I really feel like the Lord wants us to learn how to interpret the scriptures on our own and not through someone else. And now I'm not saying that we don't need teachers to kind of guide us through some really hard and difficult things and show us the scriptures, because we do, but I am saying that there comes a time where in prayer and in a relational aspect with Yehovah and his son, that I think he wants us to just learn from him. And this is a really classic example of that. Is I don't think Yeshua is referencing himself as Yehiye Asher Yehiye, I am who I am, in Exodus 3. I think he's simply saying, before Abraham was, I am he, the one who was prophesied, the one that God had set forth before the foundation of the world, the Word made flesh, the Mashiach, the Messiah, the Son of God. I'm that guy. Before God thought of Abraham, God and me. That's what I think. That's exactly what he's talking about. He is in no way, in my opinion, referencing himself as the presence in the burning bush. Although there's great similarities between him and Moses in that discussion, I don't think that he is referencing himself as the fire or the very burning of Yehovah. I'm not discussing Yeshua's deity. I'm not, saying that he's just a man, and I'm not telling you that he's God. I'm not referencing that in any aspect. I don't want to get into that. Maybe that's for a later time, but I'm just telling you that, in my opinion, he is not saying that he is the burning bush. What I do see in this is that he is referencing that Abraham saw his day, and I thought that was interesting. So in someone just a student of the scriptures, just reading the word, I think that it's important for us to be, Abraham saw his day and he was glad. Okay, let's go study Abraham to see where we might think that Abraham saw Yeshua, because that's a strange thing. Yeshua wasn't born yet. And many of you watching this is like, that's just dumb. He existed before the foundation of the world. Yeah, okay, but let's just see where he might have seen him without existing before the foundation of the world, or being some type of Christology, or let's see if we could practically see it. And in my opinion, it's in Genesis 22. The binding of Isaac, or the Akedah in the way that the Hebrews or the Jews call them in their parsha, or in their portion, right? So starting in verse Where did I write it down? Verse 9. So Genesis 22, starting in verse 9 and ending in verse 14. Let's pick it up. Then they came to the place of which God had told him. And Abraham built the altar there and arranged the wood. You guys know the story. If you don't, just read it. Read it 200, 300, 400 times. You know, we need to get this in our minds and in our hearts. Let the words of God permeate, within our souls and our spirit, so his thoughts become our thoughts. But starting back in verse 9. Then they came to the place of which God had told him. Abraham built the altar there and arranged the wood and bound his son Isaac. He bound Isaac and laid him on the altar on the top of the wood. Abraham stretched out his hand and took the knife to slay his son, but the angel of Yeshua called to him from heaven and said, Abraham, Abraham. And he said, Here I am. And he said, Do not stretch your hand against the lad and do nothing to him, for now I know that you fear God, since you have not withheld your son, your only son, from me. Then Abraham raised his eyes and looked, and behold, behind him a ram caught in the thicket by his horns. And Abraham went and took the ram, offered him up for a burnt offering in the place of his son. And Abraham called the name of that place, Yehovah will provide. And it is said to this day, in the mount of Yehovah it will be provided. In my opinion, that's what Yeshua is referencing. He is the Word that made flesh. So when this ram comes on the scene, Abraham looked at the ram. And in my opinion, it was divinely given to Abraham. That's why he says, in the mount of Yehovah it will be provided. The salvation of the world. It was given to him as a revelation that this ram will stand in the place of his son. This ram will stand in the place of sinners that desire repentance and change their lives. People that are destined to death, like Isaac was destined to death, or Abraham's knife. He was bound, but by the ram, he was set free. This is the Word made flesh. It's the very words of God, the purposes of God before the creation of the world put into play, into existence. In the lives of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Joseph, Moses, Samuel, Saul, David, Absalom, Daniel, and the rest of the people the hundreds of other people that I forgot, that God desires to write about their lives so that we could be flourished through the life of Messiah. Abraham saw the ram caught in the thicket, crown of thorns. That's all I could ever see about. And another example of something written in the scriptures is Paul says that the law is done away with now, but it's not the commandments, it's the sin and death that we accrued by disobeying the law. And in here, you get a little taste of Isaac being bound to death and being freed from that death because of the ram caught in the thicket. And when Yeshua says, Abraham, rejoice to see my day. And he was glad when he saw it. This is what he's talking about. He saw the day of Messiah. And on the very mountain that Messiah is having this conversation with these people in the temple, Abraham saw his day on that very same mountain, on Mount Moriah. That is so incredible that, that actually gets into play like that. And God can orchestrate it. It's just a master technique, just a master carpenter, how he creates these incredible things. In the beginning was the Word, the very Torah, and that Torah became flesh and dwelt among us. Praise Yehovah and his son Yeshua. Please consider these words. I know I know I'm just a dude, but I love the Lord, and I've been studying His Word for a long time. And you can either say, oh, well, that guy's got some good points, or you could say, that guy's a madman. Either way, I appreciate you considering my videos and my points of view. Anyways, shalom in Yeshua's name.